The Western was never just about gunfights or open land. In the hands of Elmore Leonard, it became something sharper, colder, and far more human. His Westerns stripped away myth and replaced it with moral pressure, quiet menace, and men forced to reveal who they truly are when violence becomes inevitable. Number 6. The Law at Randado, 1969. Elmore Leonard's Western worldview often thrived best in tight spaces, and The Law at Randado is a perfect example of how confinement intensifies moral tension. Rather than sprawling landscapes or epic shootouts, this television Western narrows its focus to authority, isolation, and the dangerous psychology of power. The result is a lean, uncomfortable story where the badge itself becomes a test of character rather than a symbol of justice. The film centers on a newly appointed lawman sent to impose order on a remote and hostile settlement. What unfolds is not a heroic rise, but a gradual erosion of certainty. Leonard's influence is unmistakable in how the protagonist is challenged not by obvious villains, but by passive resistance, manipulation, and the constant pressure to prove himself. Every decision feels like a gamble, and every assertion of authority risks escalation. Violence lingers in the background, never far away but never glorified. What makes The Law at Randado particularly Leonard-esque is its refusal to offer easy moral validation. The town is not innocent, but neither is the lawman entirely righteous. Leonard understood that power distorts behavior on both sides, and the film leans into that ambiguity. The story suggests that law without legitimacy is merely another form of force, and that isolation magnifies cruelty as much as courage. Though modest in production, the film captures Leonard's core Western philosophy. Tension grows from conversation, not confrontation. Silences carry as much weight as threats. The Western frontier here feels less like open freedom and more like a pressure chamber, where authority must either adapt or fracture. It is a quiet but essential entry in Leonard's Western legacy. Number 5. Last Stand at Sabre River, 1997. Last Stand at Sabre River reflects Elmore Leonard's mature Western voice, shaped by decades of exploring American masculinity, displacement, and the cost of survival. Set in the uneasy aftermath of the Civil War, the film strips the Western of triumph and replaces it with exhaustion. Victory has passed. What remains is survival in a land that no longer recognizes loyalty or sacrifice. The story follows a Confederate veteran returning home only to find his property occupied and his authority erased. Leonard's genius lies in how he frames this conflict not as a simple reclamation tale, but as a meditation on legitimacy. Who truly owns the land? Who has the right to enforce order? And how much violence can be justified in the name of restoration? The protagonist is not driven by vengeance, but by a weary sense of obligation to his family and to himself. Leonard's dialogue shapes the film's emotional rhythm. Conversations feel cautious, measured, and loaded with unspoken threat. Violence arrives sparingly, but when it does, it feels consequential rather than thrilling. Each act of force reshapes relationships and permanently alters the moral landscape. This restraint separates the film from traditional television westerns and aligns it firmly with Leonard's literary sensibilities. What makes Last Stand at Sabre River resonate is its understanding of aftermath. The war may be over, but its psychological debris lingers everywhere. Men cling to old hierarchies that no longer function. The frontier becomes a place of unresolved trauma rather than fresh opportunity. Leonard's Western vision here feels somber, grounded, and deeply American, in its skepticism toward authority and myth. Number 4. The Tall to 1957. Few westerns demonstrate Elmore Leonard's mastery of moral tension as elegantly as The Tall T. Adapted from one of his short stories, the film reduces the genre to its bare essentials: a small group of characters, a confined setting, and an escalating battle of wills. What emerges is a study in dignity under pressure. Randolph Scott's protagonist is not a fast gun or a legendary figure. He is an ordinary man placed in extraordinary circumstances. Leonard understood that heroism becomes most visible when stripped of spectacle. The film's power lies in its dialogue, where every exchange doubles as a psychological probe. Words become weapons, silences become threats, violence is always imminent, but rarely indulged. The villain, portrayed with chilling calm, is not driven by chaos, but by logic. Leonard excelled at crafting antagonists who believe in their own reasoning, and The Tall T benefits enormously from that restraint. The conflict feels less like good versus evil and more like incompatible philosophies colliding under stress. What elevates the film is its moral clarity without moral simplicity. The hero's integrity is tested not through action alone, but through refusal. He survives not by outgunning his captors, but by understanding them. Leonard's Western ethos shines here. Intelligence is as powerful as force, and character ultimately determines survival. Number 3. Valdez is Coming. 1971. Valdez is Coming stands as one of the bleakest and most morally uncompromising westerns ever adapted from Elmore Leonard's work. This is not a story of righteous vengeance or frontier heroics. It is a story about dignity being eroded, tested, and ultimately reclaimed by a man who never wanted violence in the first place. Leonard's worldview is unmistakable here. Violence is not cathartic. It is transactional, exhausting, and unavoidable once power structures collapse. Burt Lancaster's portrayal of Valdez is central to the film's power. Valdez is not a gunslinger or a legend. He is an aging lawman attempting to navigate a racially hostile frontier with restraint and decency. When his authority is exploited and his humanity stripped away, the film does not rush toward retaliation. Instead, it lingers on humiliation. Leonard understood that injustice cuts deepest when it is slow and deliberate, and the film allows that cruelty to breathe. The Western landscape in Valdez is Coming feels indifferent rather than romantic. Open spaces offer no refuge. Communities operate on self-interest rather than law. Leonard's narrative insists that power belongs to those willing to wield it without shame. Valdez's eventual resistance is not framed as triumph, but as necessity. Violence becomes the only remaining language left to a man denied legitimacy. What separates this film from conventional revenge westerns is its emotional weight. Leonard never allows the audience to celebrate bloodshed. Every confrontation feels costly. Every escalation feels irreversible. Valdez's struggle becomes symbolic of Leonard's recurring theme. Morality survives not through dominance, but through endurance. The film leaves behind a sense of quiet devastation rather than victory, reinforcing Leonard's belief that justice in the West was always fragile and often compromised. Number 2. Hombre, 1967. Hombre may be Elmore Leonard's most emotionally confrontational Western adaptation, precisely because it refuses sentimentality. At its core, the film dismantles assumptions about civility, prejudice, and moral authority in the American frontier. Leonard's novel provided a protagonist who does not seek approval, sympathy, or redemption. The film preserves that discomfort with remarkable fidelity. Paul Newman's John Russell is deliberately opaque. He is not interested in persuading others of his worth, nor in explaining himself. Leonard's brilliance lies in how Russell's silence becomes an indictment of those around him. The film forces its supporting characters to expose their own hypocrisy, entitlement, and prejudice simply through their reactions to him. Russell does not challenge them. He lets them reveal themselves. The Western setting amplifies this moral exposure. Trapped in hostile territory, stripped of societal structures, the characters must rely on one another. Leonard uses this pressure to interrogate who deserves leadership and who merely assumes it. Russell's competence is undeniable, but his refusal to perform heroism on demand unsettles those who believe decency should be transactional. Violence in Ombre arrives with brutal clarity. There is no mythic flourish, no cinematic relief. Leonard's worldview asserts itself fully here. Morality does not guarantee survival, but survival does not excuse immorality. Russell's choices remain principled even when they isolate him, reinforcing Leonard's belief that integrity is often misunderstood and rarely rewarded. The film endures because it confronts the audience as much as its characters. It asks whether decency must be announced to be real, and whether compassion still counts when it is given without warmth. Ombre is not comforting. That discomfort is exactly why it remains one of Leonard's most powerful Western statements. Number 1, 310 to Yuma, 1957. 310 to Yuma is the purest cinematic distillation of Elmore Leonard's Western philosophy. Stripped of spectacle and reduced to psychological confrontation, the film transforms a simple escort mission into an examination of courage, temptation, and self-respect. Leonard understood that the most dangerous conflicts are not physical, but moral, and this film builds its tension almost entirely through conversation. The central struggle is not between lawman and outlaw, but between certainty and doubt. The outlaw is charismatic, intelligent, and acutely aware of human weakness. Leonard's villains are never chaotic. They observe, probe, and manipulate. The film allows this antagonist to dominate the screen, not through violence, but through insight. Every word he speaks tests the resolve of the man tasked with holding him. What elevates 310 to Yuma beyond genre convention is its focus on internal pressure. The hero is not a confident figure of authority. He is a man burdened by failure, financial desperation, and the quiet fear of inadequacy. Leonard places him in a situation where integrity must be chosen repeatedly, not declared once. Each moment of hesitation carries weight. Each decision risks collapse. The Western setting becomes a crucible rather than a backdrop. Time itself becomes the enemy, ticking relentlessly toward the train's arrival. Leonard's pacing is surgical. Tension escalates through glances, pauses, and shifting power dynamics. Violence is minimal, but its potential hangs heavy over every exchange. The film endures because it captures Leonard's central truth about the West. Heroism is rarely loud, rarely admired, and often invisible. 310 to Yuma is not about defeating evil. It is about refusing to surrender one's moral ground when surrender would be easier. Elmore, Leonard's Westerns did not chase legend. They dismantled it. These films endure because they replace myth with pressure, spectacle with psychology, and heroics with hard choices. In Leonard's West, survival is never simple, and integrity is always the most dangerous gamble of all.